Hello everybody, and welcome to my first ever video build guide. Now, some of you may remember some of my old guides like the LE Bus Raider or Toxic Rain Occultist, but many of you probably have never seen any of them or have any inkling to who I am at all. So just super quick introduction for you. I made build guides for quite a few years, and then unfortunately I had to stop for two main reasons. The first was simply time constraints that I had, all the day-to-day stuff and working full-time. The second main reason was because it was also incredibly hard to keep updating a bunch of build guides with all the crazy changes that kept happening with PoE every league. That's great for the game, but not so great for the build creators. Thankfully, now I have a bit more free time, and GGG seems to have taken a step back from doing big meta shakeups, or at least completely deleting old builds or key components of those builds, which brings us to the here and now. So without further ado, the first such build guide I wanted to introduce is the Poison SRS Necromancer. And now, before we go any further, I would like to give a shout out to Balor Mage. Starting out as a brand new SRS player myself, I took a lot of the basics from his videos, and they helped me a lot at the start, but by the time that I ended with the build, after a couple full weeks of playtime, I feel like I changed enough about the build and changed enough items and enough gems and so on and so forth that I wanted to put my own spin on it and put out my own video and guide to go along with that playstyle, in case anyone else would like to mimic that instead. Now, the build in general is an amazing league starter and probably the best build I've ever done in 10 years for early mapping and first getting into things. All of it can be done on an incredibly low budget. You can min-max and, like really push it if you want to, or you can use it as a league starter and then, save up some money, get through all your maps, and then do something else later on, and either one of those is perfectly fine. It has one of the best single targets that I have ever done, and a very respectable clear, all while being extremely tanky, which makes it one of the best all-rounder builds I've ever done. Now I'm going to try to break things up and organize it very well, step by step on the guide, and I'll put in chapters so you guys can skip ahead or go back and see things that you want to. But I want to make sure I go through every little detail in case you guys have no idea about the game in general or the build in general, have never done it. And I'll try to answer any of the questions that someone first starting out with SRS might want to know. So first, let me showcase in the end game version of the build. I've definitely put a lot of currency into this character now. We'll go through, do maps, do a map at least, to showcase it and see, so you can get an idea of how the build plays. So first, we have a map rolled up here. This is just an average. It turned it out to be an 8-mod map. You can run all map mods on this build. There's only two that I would like to suggest that don't feel the best. The first is actually going to be Desecrate. So if you roll Desecrate on your map, we have Eldritch Battery and Mind Over Matter on the build, which means our ES covers our mana pool instead. And we use that, as you can see, to cast our SRSs. So it uses the ES. When you step on a Desecrate on the ground, well, that stops our regen. So you cast and you cast and you cast and you cast, and we got tons of ES regen by just naturally. So it feels fine until it's not regenerating at all, and then you run out. And once you run out of ES, you can't cast anymore, and that obviously feels bad. So you can definitely avoid it. It's doable. You can try to avoid the Desecrates. You can go through, it's fine. But it is slightly annoying. The other one is also less recovery for pretty much the same reason. For life and ES, the less recovery really starts to slow down. So if you cast too much, run through too much, it could definitely feel kind of eh. Everything else is perfectly fine. Doesn't matter. It blows through all other mechanics, your minions, so anything like Reflect or any of that doesn't matter. The build in general is super defensive, which is really nice. We have literally max block, max spell block. We have 100% chance to suppress. We have max resistances and chaos, almost chaos. I think I'm actually at 74%. You could obviously get 75. I just haven't got there. We have Aegis Aurora on, so we actually get 80 cold res instead of 75 as well. We get a lot of regen. Aegis obviously regenerates ES on block. We have fortification thanks to our animate guardian, which we'll get into a little bit later. Bone armor as an ascendancy is super ridiculous. Basically a 2200 damage shield that lasts a little over 5 seconds, and the cooldown is 3 seconds. You simply put it on your left click, and as you're moving, it automatically blocks for you and all of your minions as well. We have freeze and shock immune. We're shock immune thanks to Tempest Shield. Freeze immune thanks to the Pantheon. And as general, we're a minion build, and our minions are doing most of the work, so you're always moving, and you usually have a wall of minions to help to add all of that together, and it is extremely defensive to play. We're going to run a map now, just so I can show you the basic playstyle. I do have Sextants on. One maining, just random extra mobs, extra strong boxes, whatever. I'm running a few scarabs. I normally run with blight scarabs as well. It's really good for doing league content. Legions is a bit touchy early on. All other content, it blows through harvests, rituals, blights. Like what it's great build for almost all league content. I usually run Jun as well, but for now we're just going to, just for the sake of the video, we're just going to run a normal map and go like that. Now the first thing is SRS itself. It is tied to Unleash, so as you can see the little numbers on here, 4. Once you cast once, you actually cast the skill 4 times. Count a couple seconds. Wait till it hits up to 4 again. Press. That way you don't have to constantly click, spam all that stuff. But for single target, every time you go into a new room, a new instance, a new map, a boss arena, like anything, all your SRSs that are already summoned go away. So to initially cast them, you don't have to wait for the Unleash seals either. You can literally just hold down right click, and you'll keep spawning them up to the maximum of what is 20. We get 25, which we'll talk into a little bit later with the gear. And then for the SRS, you can go as fast or as slow as you want here. They basically spread out and do all the killing. You can really go through the map and kind of loop back. Looks like we did get some ritual spawns on this. And then every once in a while, we manually cast our offering here for Bone Offering, which gives us block, gives our minions block. It applies to us. We have Vol Haste to go a little bit faster. Now again, you can go through the mobs, and you can cast, click, and move on, and then kind of like spin back once everything is dead, which dies pretty fast. And pick up all the gear and the loot, or you can just go a little bit slower and wait for the stuff, and then pick it up as you go. Either one is perfectly fine. I know some people like to really go zoom. The other thing I want to talk about is we have, if you've never used it before, it's the first time I've used it actually, Divine Blessing and Malevolence. Basically, it turns your aura into a temporary buff, which is what this is down here, and it costs a big chunk of mana, essentially, to cast it, since we're using the Covenant, and it makes skills cost life and mana. It has a mana and life cost. Doesn't really matter. You regen fast enough. And the buff, as you can see up here, every time you cast it, is 25 seconds at full level, which is a pretty long time. So basically, you make sure you have your Divine Blessing offering up. Super tanky, nothing really does a lot to you. The Chaos Res is great for this type of stuff. You hit Haste when you want to. Vol Haste, it really ups your damage and the attack speed and the move speed of you and your minions. And then basically every 3-4 seconds you can right click to cast your skill just to make sure you have out a decent amount of SRSs. It doesn't really matter if you have full stacks. I'm running right into the Bitter Ritual. This is a terrible placement on this one, but gives you an idea. Plenty defensive because of that. Manually cast the offering. Now you can link it to something like Arcanist Brand, but I honestly found it terrible. It's great for bossing, for mapping. It felt really bad. You would try to throw your Arcanist Brand out, which doesn't have a huge range on it, and try to attach it, and it would not attach, and then the offering wouldn't go off, and the Desecrate wouldn't go off, which means you didn't have your curse going. I rearranged things a bit, so now you have your curse attached to Blasphemy, which means it's on all the time. For clear and for single target. Specters, we run, once we get everything pushed, we get 3 Specters. You go for the Arena Master, Pale Seraphim, and the Carnage Chieftain, I believe it is. Carnage Chieftain is the one who gives Frenzy Charges. For the boss, we do have a multi-strike here that you can switch in for Melee Splash, and it'll do even more. For this, just for the sake of showing the gear, I'm actually not even going to switch that. I only ever really use this for doing big bossing. Any kind of Ubers, any kind of like Maven, Shaper, Cyrus, anything like that. Besides that, we're actually going to hit our Ball Haste just to cast faster. Hit our Aura, go into the boss, and then watch the SRS just, and that was only literally like 9. The rest of my guys set up here for God knows whatever reason. So it's actually much faster than that. And that's with Melee Splash, not multi-strike. So you can see the single target on this build is actually absolutely insane. Animate Guardian, there is a setup. I also have it in POB as well. Early on, you kind of use zombies and you flip it around. I used zombies all while leveling. I didn't do Animate Guardian until much later, until like red tier maps. And then even with the Animate Guardian, I did almost like a budget version of the Animate Guardian, replace the zombies. And then this is the final end game, which is much more expensive. Just because the Crown of the Tyrant.
I'm gay.
Just because the Crown of the Tyrant. And the Kingmaker, the Soul Taker, is very expensive. Once you get it and you're at this point and you're geared, like your Animate Guardian is pretty much immune to everything. They have a ridiculous amount of life. None of that stuff really matters. And I'll go into the gear like a little bit more later on. After we clear the map, and we'll be able to kind of pause it for a minute and go down. You just have to make sure you cast your offering. Now your offering lasts like a decent amount. If it's not up, it's not the end of the world, but you won't be max block and spell block without the offering. I pop Vol Haste pretty much whenever it's up, and then I try to keep my aura on. Because this adds, just the Divine Blessing Malevolent adds a lot of DPS to the build, which you'll be able to see in the POB if you ever drop it off. I'm also kind of showcasing how I personally do a map. Like, I'm stopping to pick up all like the little stuff that I still do because, well, that's what I do and how I play. You can totally like zoom through the rest, like the parts, and just throw out your SRS and just move on, and everything dies as it goes. With Blight, it takes even longer, but when you juice up a map that much, you get a lot more out of it as well too, so... And then once you have your SRSs out, you can tell like they stay up for a while, and then just right-clicking every once in a while keeps everything up. The little explosions that you see sometimes are the Asnath gloves on the Animate Guardian. So all that little yellow foggy stuff, I don't know what else you would call it, is basically the Animate Guardian hitting, and then the curse that explodes everything that's cursed. That's the basic idea of the build. It doesn't get any simpler than that. Bossing is absolutely ridiculous as well. If you just want to use it to farm Ubers, to farm Mavens, to farm whatever, like it's super safe. It's a minion build. We'll go through our rituals later. And that's pretty much it for the map. And that's it. So I do want to say too, Feeding Frenzy is a buff that you attach to your Golem here. You have Feeding Frenzy and Stone Golem. As soon as the golem gets the buff, that buff applies to you and all your minions, so it doesn't matter like where it comes from. Then you get the regen yourself from the golem. And then the animate guardian and specters. So that's it for the basic showcase of the build. So let's go into the gearing and stuff a little bit here. These are just a couple fractured items. Both garbage. And we actually forgot to bottle one of our vessels here. Probably the last one we did. I have to zip through the map and find out which one it is. Of course, it's going to be the last one that we check here. We do use dash and second wind for mobility. I personally love it. It's my favorite combination. You can obviously freely mix that up. If you like flame dash better, if you like smoke, like whatever you want to use, that's fine. I just like to do anomalous dash along with second wind. It gives you a little bit further travel distance on dash and also gives it 3 charges, and the cooldown recovery is pretty good on the charges, so it's up most of the time. Now, for the actual gearing of the build here, let's turn our map off. We have, it's really not too terrible, and this is, don't forget, this is a very, very min-maxed version of it. We have the Covenant, obviously. It's just absolutely best in slot for the build. Poison, non-poison, even this is probably the first item you pick up when you switch from non-poison to poison, because the added chaos damage gem, the 7th like essentially, adds to both of them. Obviously it does more once you're full poison, but one of the first purchases you make. Severed in Sleep is the other one. You used to run United in Dream. We definitely do not do that anymore. Now you get the Withered on hit, you get the crit multi, which definitely helps later on, the Envy, and they obviously get Chaos Res. You want the Withered on hit, you definitely do not want the chance to poison, so upgrading this actually makes it worse. Aegis Aurora is not too bad. Obviously you do not need foil versions and everything, I just happened to buy them because they were about the same price and they looked cooler. This really helps give you some res, max cold res. It gives you a nice big fat chance to block. And then obviously you recover ES when you block. So even though we don't really get a lot of defenses with armor or evasion, it still adds up real nicely. You'll watch your ES get pretty low, and then you're in a ritual or you're in a blight or whatever, and you block a button and it zoom, shoots straight up. Real good. The helmet here is probably one of the slightly harder pieces to craft if you get the enchant, the implicit, so on and so forth. The big thing on this, you want the +2 level of all minion skill gems. Life obviously is good, and then any res that you can, get besides that. The implicits don't really matter. They're very low. So they're both lessers, so it's literally the easiest one to get, and then you just spam them until you get it. And then obviously in the enchant, which I used an enchant service for, and it's still probably one of the more expensive pieces outside of Ashes. The gloves, same thing. We just get some suppress on our helmet, on our gloves, and on our boots. You have to be very, very careful with this because we barely managed to get 100%. And that is with this jewel here that gives us extra suppress to hit 100. So if you want to hit 100%, you have to get pretty high rolls on these 3 pieces. Besides that, we get Dex, Life, Res. Realistically, that's only 4 mod gloves. It's really not that hard to get. Boots, same thing. We have Dex, Suppress, Life, Move Speed. We did get a little extra Res. Also not bad. The implicits we rolled ourselves, which again, 1 lesser, 1 greater. Super easy to roll. You can obviously improve those or go the more you want, like the more expensive you want to put on your exotic currency there and your Eldritch stuff and get better implicits or higher rolls. You can definitely do that if you want. Darkness Enthroned is the go-to belt. Obviously you want this as close to 100% as you can get. I think I started with a 72 or something like that. And then I actually found one and went up to like 86. And then I bought this one for 98, just because the difference from going to 98 to 100 at the time was multiple divines. And I said, well, it's realistically not going to do much. But the closer to 100% that is, the easier it is on your jewels to get the chance to poison. These are very, very, very good and very, very expensive jewels. It's probably the worst part of the build. To get life, chance to poison, which you have to get as close to 100% as you can, and the minion damage if you use the minion skill recently, and then the additional chaos damage to minions. These literally 4 modules cost the better part of 20 to 30 divines each. Now, you do not need anything near that for the build to be decent and to clear all content. This is like the absolute extreme min-max of the build. I first started, I literally had like chance to poison. I don't think I had chaos damage at all or the minions deal damage. I went life, poison damage, and then looked for a semi-decent like third mod, and they were like 50 chaos each, and it worked perfectly fine all through maps. This was just for, I went strong into Sanctum, and for the League mechanic, rank 2000 in the Trial of the Ancestors right now. So I really wanted to min-max the single target potential of it to help with those, and the build got pretty crazy. The rings, we have one that's kind of more defensive. We get Dex, Life, and then we packed a whole bunch of resistances onto it just to max our res. The other one is almost purely a defensive one with a little bit of chaos res. So it's a minion one to give them resists. Attack and cast speed, which is huge for SRS. The non-channeling skills is just kind of an extra just to cut back on the cost a little bit. You can essentially roll any other prefix that you want. It just had a prefix that was open, and then it has minion damage obviously fractured on it, so this ring was actually pretty expensive. Same thing, you do not need rolls anywhere near that high. I actually had the worst rings literally up until like level like 97 or something. I self-leveled the build myself up until 99. I didn't do any 5-way rotas, anything. The 99 to 100, I did some 5-ways just because it was part of one of the challenges. Death-wise, I have played this character for 14 days and 5 hours. So for over 2 straight weeks, I've played this character. By that time, I would probably accumulate 500-600 deaths on any other character I've done. I definitely do not play very defensive. While leveling, I tend to chuck my body at things if they become an issue. That's why I play softcore. 500-600 deaths is not anything crazy. Like over that time, when you first get to maps and you have to corrupt your red tier maps, and they get crazy mods, and you're in this like weird leveling gear, and you like you die constantly trying to push and unlock those. And on this character, instead of 500-600 deaths, I am at 213. So, very, very, very defensive, which is great. The last item I want to talk about here is Ashes of the Stars. So this is probably the most expensive piece out of all of them. Obviously, it's going to depend on the leagues, what the roles are. There's a few things I want to point out on this. It gives a huge amount of damage. It gives a huge amount of survivability. The quality that it adds to all the minion skill gems. The minions get movement speed, they get damage, they get max life. As you can see, like just Divergent, Animate Guardian, plus 30 quality. Now it's supposed to give 40% increased minion max life just because the extra 30 quality. We're literally up to like 92%. Like it's literally insane. The other thing I want to talk about, reservation efficiency, you can kind of balance it out between the Anoint of Charisma, a couple gear pieces, a couple skill nodes. We do roll it like on mana reservation efficiency on this. Depending if you get anything on jewels, you just have to make sure that you can fit all your auras on and they're good. So you don't need a perfect roll or anything like on this. If you do get a higher roll, then you can maybe get like a bit less on like a couple passive points or a jewel or whatever. But it's not too hard to fit in. The bigger part of this is to get 30 quality exactly. So when we run our SRS gem right here, 2120, For every 10% quality it gets, it lets you add 1 summon Raging Spirit. So you normally get 20 max summon Raging Spirits. You get 22 with this gem once it's 20 quality. Well, if you get a perfect 30% quality on your Ashes, then you get 3 more summon Raging Spirits, so you can get a maximum of 25. If you get like 28, 29%, something like that, you're only going to get 24. Obviously, for most people, that's perfectly fine. If you really, really, really want to min-max the build and get every one you possibly can, this will go up to 25 summon Raging Spirits. And then you can't get, no matter how much you cast, no matter how fast you cast, you can't get more than that. Obviously, the more you have, it helps for clear, and if you're doing some kind of bossing, the more you have, obviously, the more damage you deal. Going from 20 to 25 is literally like 25% more damage because you're getting 1/4 more of your Summon Raging Spirits. Besides that, a chance to poison is one thing I want to go over with on the build. So when you first switch, you level the build as non-poison. You start your mapping as non-poison. You go through all that. Once you get a Severed in Sleep, get rid of this. Once you get a Severed in Sleep and a Covenant, you're pretty much, and a Darkness Enthroned, I guess. You're pretty much ready to switch over to Chance to Poison. You have to try to get as close to 100% as you can, because it's a lot of damage. If you get like 72% or something, it's gonna feel a lot less damage than normal. The best and the end game way to get that is to roll the Chance to Poison on Abyss Jewels, which is a pretty rare roll, as you can see from these, and it's only 1 tier, and it rolls 10 to 15. So between putting jewels that have high poison chance into your belt, which, depending on your roll, can almost double the effect of it, you want to get to 100%. Now, when you're first starting off, and you obviously can't buy super crazy jewels and high percent chance to poison and all that, and you don't have like a very high effect on your Darkness Enthroned, you can actually, instead of Void Manipulation, you can use Chance to Poison gem. It's definitely not as good as this gem, but it gives 40% flat poison just from the gems, so you can start with that. Then you can kind of build it later once you get more jewels and more everything socketed in, and that goes over. Then you can use POB to, hey, which gem is better, and then even if you lose a little bit of chance to poison, and maybe you only get to like 83, 84%, Void Manip is still going to be way better at that point than just the chance to poison, even if you don't have 100% chance. The other thing for that would be Cluster Jewels. This build is very easy on jewels in general. You don't get a Watcher's Eye. You basically get the Abyss Jewels. You have a few more socketed into the tree here. This is still one that I need to change for a 4th mod because I don't have it. This is another one. But besides that, we have this Green Nightmare just to get our Suppress, which comes way later in the thing. And then we have almost no other jewels literally at all, except this one cluster up here. This, you want to get this is very up to you type of thing. You want a 12 passive. You obviously want Minion 1. And then I like to go with the 3% increased attack and cast speed with the 35% increased effect. If you do not get 35% increased effect, this actually doesn't go up at all to 4%. So you need at least the 35 for the 3% attack and cast speed to go to 4%. So you get 4% every single node, and you take a lot of... You can see once you hover over it what it actually gives. And each one's 4% attack speed, 4% attack speed. You add that up, you got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 nodes that you get, which right there is 32% increased attack speed, which is crazy for SRS. Now, I took the notable, because right now in Trial of Ancestors, I don't want to talk about it a lot, because I have no idea if it's going to go core. You can get tattoos. And you can do some stuff with your little passives. There's not a whole ton to this build you can do, but I definitely picked up a few to ease my chaos resistance, which let me drop it from this jewel. Normally, you want to go for the increased attack and cast speed, the increased effect, and then the end ultimate, like 400 billion divine jewel would be to get a high life roll and a high chaos roll. That way every single one of these small passives will give you a bunch of life, a bunch of chaos res, and then a whole crap load of damage to go along with it. Each one of these also gives the base the 13% increased damage on top of the attack and cast speed. Just losing this jewel literally cuts your damage literally in like half. It's crazy. The notable I took is Call to the Slaughter. Increased damage, more attack and cast speed, and movement speed, which is awesome for all minions straight across the board. Your PM threw me for a loop there. Your Spectres, your Golem, you're having movement speed on all of your Spectres is absolutely awesome. For the medium cluster, it was really not that hard at all. This is very defensive for your SRS. The first notable makes it so your minions cannot be damaged if they were created recently. So for SRS, 4 seconds. So you cast SRS, now SRS cannot be targeted normally. However, any kind of AoE splashes, any AoE auras, anything like that can damage the SRS. They are not invincible without this, before you get this node anyway. They're not targeted by attacks or spells or anything like that, but they can still die. You'll notice once you're leveling, if you have any kind of slams or anything like that, you're fighting an enemy, and your SRSs are constantly dying and not attacking, well, you're not doing any damage. So you pick up this as soon as you can, and for at least 4 seconds, they are completely immune to all damage. They cannot be killed, they cannot be damaged by dots, they cannot nothing, and then, well, once your SRSs are up all the time, you can do all the damage. The other one is just a little extra on the side. It's situational. You don't have to use it if you don't want to, but it gives more movement speed, chaos res, additional physical damage reduction, and more max life, which is more max life. So besides that, that's it for jewels. It's super easy on jewel slots. Get the couple abysses. Everything else is good. SRS accuracy is one that I want to get. On the gem itself, it does not say this, but on POB, you can go to it. I'll show a little bit of the POB in a minute. It will show you on your minions what the accuracy is. You get accuracy as this gem levels. It's almost at 2120, almost reaches 100%. It's a bit short of 100%, but we actually use precision up here, which gives a whole bunch of accuracy on top of it. So you don't have to worry about it. It definitely hits 100%, and while you're leveling, all that stuff, you don't have to worry about it at all. It's pretty much 100% all the time. If it falls slightly below that, you won't even realistically even notice it. The third Spectre, you start out with 2. It's very hard to get the third one. You have to have a level 25, I don't even remember where I put it, Raised Spectre to get that third minion. So up until then, you just use the Arena Master and the Pale Seraphim. Once I got level 25, then I picked up the Carnage Chieftain just to give frenzy charges to my minions and stuff, which really upped their attack damage too. Flasks are super simple as well. I just have a life flask to remove bleeding. Now, Bone Armor itself also makes you immune to bleeding, which is super good for normal bleed. This is more for Corrupted Blood. Corrupted Blood is not even really an issue. The Essence Mob is the biggest issue I've seen with Corrupting Blood. It shoots out all those blood balls, and every time you touch them, you get a stack of Corrupting Blood. If you really juice up your essences and get all the passes for them and stuff, they duplicates the mob. The balls spawn out like crazy. You definitely, if you don't have some kind of bleed immunity, it's going to suck. Bottled Faith we do. We don't really care about our crit. Our crit doesn't do anything. Just making them take extra damage is what it's for. 10% increased damage is a 10% more multiplier, essentially. And Consecrated Ground definitely gives us more regen and stuff like that. We have our little Speedy Flask here. You know, obviously faster, better. All my flasks are rolled to use when charges reach full. We have a Quartz Flask just to get the suppress and the phasing. You can roll anything on these. I just did reduced effective curses, increased duration, because that's how it rolled when I transnogged it. Besides that, don't really matter, but we need the suppress to hit 100%, or else we'd be staying at 90. And then we have a Roomies just to make sure that we get our max block. Without this, we're slightly under. You keep your multi-strike gem here too in your inventory. You can keep it in your stash. You can do whatever, and that's pretty much it for the gearing. The gems are pretty straightforward. They're in the POB. I don't really want to go through all of the gems. They're all written out and they're much better than I'd be able to go through in here. I'm just going to quickly scroll over them so you can kind of see what they do. Certain things like this, just make sure that they're not linked together. If you have Divine Blessing, like linked with like Second Wind, it's basically going to cast it twice, and the mana, like the mana cost stuff, will go through the roof. If you have it attached to any auras or anything like that, it like your things won't be making sense. You won't be able to figure out what it is. How come, like, you know, you're following the guide and the reservations all over the place, but you're missing like 40% of your mana? It's usually something silly like Second Wind, so you just break up the links and it's easy enough. The boots, we have our Despair, Blasphemy, Enlighten, just to help that reservation cost. This is another thing with the reservation efficiency. Now, if you want to buy an Enlighten level 4, then it would help cut down on costs on like some of the other reservation efficiency. We only have two auras linked to it though, so it won't be as good as global reservation efficiency, but we have precision up here. Our minions only have 5% crits, but along with the accuracy and giving them increased crit strike chance, coupled with our crit strike multiplier per withered debuff on enemy, between the multiplier and the crit chance, this gem actually adds a lot of damage. It's very surprising. You'd think it'd be weird that precision crit strike chance does a lot to any kind of minions or anything like that, but when you add all three of those things together, it definitely, you can see on POB, if you untick that gem, it's a significant amount of damage that it gives. Tempest Shield we leave on all the time, makes us shock immune and gives us a big chunk of spell block. And then Bone Offering again to give us our max block for everything, and it applies to the minions as well. Here we have our Spectre, Meat Shield, Minion Life, and Animate Guardian. Now, before I used Animate Guardian, use Ray Zombies. So you actually have Ray Spectre and Ray Zombie in here instead of the Animate Guardian. Just put a fourth blue link. I actually also, while I was leveling and into most of my maps, I actually put Feeding Frenzy on the zombies and the specters instead, and then put Meat Shield on the golem. So this allowed your golem to stay alive more and play a bit more defensive, and allowed your zombies and specters to be more aggressive and actually go into battle instead of sitting around you. And while you're leveling and stuff, that helped a decent amount. There is a few weird alt quality. Well, this is the main links. So we have Melee Splash, which you can interchange out for multi-strike. You definitely don't need Awakened multi-strike. Again, this is the super min-max. I used normal multi-strike literally all the way up until I was level 100, and I just got this again for Trial of the Ancestors and Sanctum running, pretty much. We have Unbound Ailments. Now, these are all Awakened, but you obviously just use the normal gem until you can afford Awakened. Even a level 1-0 quality Awakened gem is usually better than a 2020 of the normal version. So just buy these whenever you get money and you can. Minion Damage, Void Manip, Unleash, obviously. This is a big one. It takes, at level 5, it takes the 3 seals and makes it 4. So it actually casts the skill an additional time. You also get less damage with each, like on a normal spell. But the less damage does not apply to your SRS. So it's not like your first SRS does full damage and then your second one does 38% less, so on and so forth. Like, that's not how it works. Thankfully, it's just minions, and the minions have their own normal attack, cast, and damage. We only have a few alt quality gems in general. Divergent Summon Raging Spirit is one, and that's just to get the extra Summon Raging Spirits. We have a couple on our dash and our second wind, and then we have Animate Guardian, and this is just to give more max life for our Animate Guardian, just to make sure he's super tanky, because you do not want him to die and lose like 7, 8, 10 divines worth of gear. Besides that, that's mostly it. I'm going to pop up the POB real quick and just show it gets... With SRS, it's slightly confusing here. We'll just go back in general, don't save. Poison SRS Necromancer. Now, to get this on in general, it normally doesn't even start. The first thing I'm going to do is switch your skill to actual Summon Raging Spirit, obviously. Items, I usually turn on all the flasks. Now, obviously, your flasks are not on 100% of the time during boss fights, but most normal bossing and for everything I'm using this build for, they're literally on all the time because you kill bosses in like 1 to 2 seconds, like depending on how much like ramp up and stuff you do. And the next biggest thing is for skills. You have to find Summon Raging Spirit on here, and you have to click this, include full DPS. Without this, you have no DPS. People have no idea how to look if they've never done this before. I personally had no idea myself. To be able to see the Summon Raging Spirit damage and how much damage they actually do in your minions, you have to click include in full DPS, and then you have to put the count of how many Raging Spirits you have. Now, the normal count is going to be 20. Once you get the Ashes of the Stars and the Divergent Gem, this actually goes up to 25. And as you can see, warning here, the full dot DPS in game is this right here. Full poison DPS, 35,791,000. Once it passes that number, it doesn't do any more poison damage. Why there's a dot cap, I don't know. You'd have to ask GGG, go back and look it up. Now, Summon Raging Spirit itself also does normal hits. You get a lot of added damage on top of everything else, as you can see from this. The poison damage that they take is capped out at 35 million. The actual full DPS is 63,635,000. Now that is assuming that every single one of your SRSs are attacking the same target. So like if you're doing Maven or Shaper or whatever, and every SRS you have is attacking the same target, that's what this number is. Now, obviously, if you go down and you only have 10 SRSs attacking the same one, obviously your damage is now down to 26 million, which is still honestly absolutely ridiculous with the amount of damage it does, but this is, again, assuming every SRS you have is doing the same amount. Then you go to the calculations. I lied. This will show you, just real quick, if you do Summon Raging Spirit here, this will show you your stats. If you click this box, minion stats, now it will show you things like your accuracy, okay? So it shows you what you get here. You have a 100% chance to hit, so your SRSs hit all the time. This shows the crit. Thanks to precision, it's up to 9.55%, and your crit multi goes up to 2.55. Are times 2.55 basically. So it actually comes out to a huge amount of damage that it does. You can see here, if you actually go to precision, we're at 63.6, and you take precision off. Actually, this doesn't, it's still a few million damage, but it doesn't, what's the percent on here? Minion. So the minion adds a total of 4.8% combined DPS, which is still almost a 5% DPS increase. The lower the accuracy and other stuff is, the more that actually improves too. But that's the end game, again, assuming all 25 SRS are attacking. The other thing you can see on here is, where is it? The chance to poison. Chance to poison, as you can see on mine, because I haven't upgraded my last couple jewels, is actually only at 96%. If you got this up to 100%, you'd actually be doing even more full DPS. That's something I probably should work on going forward, because it's still going to be, I don't want to say it's a full 4% more damage, especially if the poison cap is being hit, but you definitely want poison chance to be as close to 100% as possible. If you untick this, it shows all your player stats for your stats and stuff like that. The last thing you want to see on this is the configuration screen. There's actually not a whole lot going on here. Minions have frenzy charges because of your chieftain. If you don't have the chieftain, you lose frenzy charges, and now you lose almost 10 million DPS. So that is a big increase. Fortify comes from Animate Guardian, which is just defensive stuff. Are you on Consecrated Ground? Yes, because of Bottled Faith. That, again, just gives you regen. Almost doubles it, actually. 215 to 450, actually more than doubles it. Withered Stacks is the biggest important thing here to see your DPS. That is because you're Severed in Sleep weapon. If you had no Wither Stacks, what did I untick on here, actually? Now we're only at 56 million. I messed something up. Oh, that's do you use frenzy charges? That's what I wanted. Okay. So that's minion frenzy charges. You see now if withered stacks, ready? 63 million, lose withered stacks, literally half our damage. SRS definitely hit fast enough. They definitely get 15 wither stacks very fast, so that's up all the time. And then is the enemy on consecrated ground? Yes. Guardian Pinnacle Boss, 63 million damage. That's a lot. That's basically the POB. I do have leveling trees in here, just so people can take a look and see how to level. I'm not going to really go over those now. You can obviously go through the POB and see those. Skills, I also put in here what you want to get through the axe. Endgame non-poison is before you switch to the poison build. And then endgame poison, this is just for the gems. Items, I just left the endgame items in here. While you're leveling, things are so simple. You basically go life res and you're done. Like you get any kind of minion damage, anything like that. But I'm not going to put in like 20 sets of gear that you're barely even going to use. You just go for life res and then you work on this stuff, basically. You obviously do not need anything this crazy. And that's pretty much it. The last thing I want to go over before we end this guide is the Animate Guardian buff. Okay, so right now with the full absolute endgame gear, I have it in the notes over here actually. Crown of the Tyrant with a white socket is a few divs, so you definitely want to make sure your Animate Guardian is good before you get into this. Kingmaker is definitely the most expensive. I do have a couple budget items in here, which I used until I got those. But once I sure my Animate Guardian was not going to die to literally anything, then I spent the money and got these because they're definitely better. Garb of the Ephemeral, I think I actually spelled that wrong. I think it's EPH, something like that. Use Asnath's gloves, and then you use Windscreen boots just so they can get both curses on them. The only problem is POB does not calculate the Animate Guardian stuff, so you have to add them as custom modifiers down here. Additional curse, chaos damage to minions, nearby allies 50% crit strike multi, nearby enemies have 10% minus 10% to chaos res, that's because the helm, and fortify. You can see obviously if I take this, watch the DPS number, and I pull that off, that drops again, what, 8-9 million? So the Animate Guardian is a huge... That was not supposed to be copied. I guess I just won't save this. This is a huge decrease if you get rid of your Animate Guardian. And that's also, this damage is just from your SRS. You also have Spectres. Your Golem, actually, every once in a while, especially while leveling, you'll see him hit something and the whole section like blows up. Like with all the passives and stuff you get on the tree, like all of your minions do a significant amount of damage, not just the SRS. So that's actually more damage on top of the SRS damage. That's pretty much it for the build. Pull back up. Now I'll break this up as good as it can, and that's basically my first video build guide. I know some people prefer those instead of others. If you guys have any questions or comments, feel free to stop by the stream, post them in the video. The guide is probably the go-to best place if you have specific questions, because I check those at least twice every single day. And I have it set up to message me if we get anything. Thanks for your time, and I hope this build helps others out there as well.